Sarah Mitchell never imagined that a small black device, no bigger than a smartphone, would completely change how she saw herself and the world around her. The 28-year-old marketing executive from London had always been the type to avoid confrontation, preferring to cross the street rather than walk past a rowdy group outside a pub. But everything changed on that rainy Tuesday evening in October when she purchased the stun gun from a self-defense shop in Camden. The shop owner, a burly man with kind eyes named Derek, had shown her various options: pepper spray, personal alarms, and then the stun gun. When he demonstrated the crackling blue electricity that jumped between the metal prongs, Sarah felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like prey in the urban jungle. Growing up as the youngest of three sisters in a quiet suburb of Manchester, Sarah had always been protected. Her father, a police officer, had taught his daughters to be cautious, perhaps too cautious. "The world can be dangerous for young women," he would say, his voice heavy with the weight of cases he'd seen. Sarah carried this caution with her when she moved to London 5 years ago, fresh out of university with dreams of conquering the corporate world. But London had been harder than she expected. The late nights at the office meant walking to the tube station in darkness. The catcalls from construction workers made her morning commute uncomfortable. The aggressive homeless man who regularly shouted at passers-by near her flat had her taking longer routes home. Each incident chipped away at her confidence until she felt like a mouse scurrying through a city of cats. The stun gun changed that. As she walked out of Derek's shop with her purchase tucked safely in her handbag, Sarah's posture straightened, her stride lengthened. She even made eye contact with a group of teenagers loitering outside the station, something she never would have done before. At home that evening, she practiced drawing the device from her bag. She studied the instruction manual carefully, learning about the safety switch and proper grip. The manufacturer claimed it could deliver 950,000 volts, enough to incapacitate an attacker temporarily without causing permanent damage. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Her flatmate, Jessica, was less enthusiastic when Sarah showed her the new purchase. Jessica was a social worker who believed in de-escalation and communication. "You sure about this, Sar?" She asked, examining the device warily. "These things can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." But Sarah was already intoxicated by the sense of security it provided. That night, she slept better than she had in months. The stun gun on her nightstand, like a technological guardian angel. The transformation in Sarah's behavior was gradual but noticeable. At work, she spoke up more in meetings. When her colleague Marcus tried to take credit for her campaign idea, she confronted him directly instead of letting it slide as usual. Her manager, Patricia, even commented on her newfound assertiveness during their monthly one-on-one. On the streets, Sarah walked with purpose. She no longer clutched her bag nervously or avoided eye contact. The weight of the stun gun in her purse was like carrying confidence in physical form. She even started taking her preferred route home, past the shouty homeless man, though she kept her hand near her bag just in case. 3 weeks after her purchase, Sarah had her first real test. She was leaving a client dinner in Soho around 10 o'clock when a man approached her at the bus stop. He was drunk, swaying slightly, and stood too close for comfort. "Hey, beautiful, waiting for me?" he slurred, his breath reeking of cheap beer. The old Sarah would have mumbled something and moved away, maybe even left the bus stop entirely. But the new Sarah stood her ground. "No, I'm not. Please leave me alone." The man laughed, moving closer. "Come on. Don't be like that. Just being friendly." Sarah's hand found the stun gun in her bag. Her thumb located the safety switch. "I said, leave me alone. I won't ask again." Something in her tone must have penetrated his drunken haze, because he raised his hands and backed away, muttering about stuck-up women as he stumbled off. Sarah's heart was racing, but she felt powerful, victorious even. She had stood up for herself without even needing to reveal her weapon. Word of Sarah's transformation spread through her social circle. Her friends noticed she was more outgoing, more willing to go out in the evenings, more confident in social situations. Her sister Emma, visiting from Manchester, was particularly surprised. "You're different," Emma said over coffee in Covent Garden. "More," I don't know. Assertive? It's good to see. Sarah almost told her about the stun gun, but decided against it. Emma, like their father, would probably worry and lecture her about safety. Better to let her think it was just personal growth, but power, even the illusion of it, can be intoxicating. Sarah began to seek out situations where she could feel that rush of authority. She started frequenting bars and clubs she previously avoided, almost hoping someone would give her trouble. She intervened in arguments between strangers, positioning herself as a peacekeeper while her hand rested on her bag. Her colleague Rachel invited her to a boxing class, and Sarah eagerly accepted. As she hit the heavy bag, she imagined using her stun gun on various threats. The instructor complimented her intensity, but Rachel seemed concerned by the aggression Sarah displayed. The stun gun became more than just protection. It became part of her identity. She researched different models online, joined self-defense forums, and even considered getting a second one to keep at home. She practiced quick draws in her bedroom mirror, timing how fast she could deploy the weapon from various positions. One evening, while walking through Hyde Park after work, Sarah witnessed a couple arguing heatedly. The man was gesticulating wildly, while the woman looked distressed. The old Sarah would have hurried past, maybe called the police if it seemed serious, but the new Sarah approached them directly. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her hand already in her bag. The couple looked at her in surprise. The man, clearly annoyed by the interruption, told her to mind her own business, but Sarah stood firm, addressing the woman directly. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman, embarrassed, assured her they were fine, just having a disagreement. The man, now angrier, took a step toward Sarah. "I said mind your own business." Sarah's grip tightened on the stun gun. She could feel the textured handle, her thumb on the safety. "I'm making it my business. If she says she's fine, I'll leave." The tension was thick until the woman, clearly wanting to defuse the situation, took her partner's arm and led him away, apologizing to Sarah for the disturbance. Sarah watched them go, her heart pounding, not with fear but with exhilaration. She had faced down a potentially violent man without backing down, but the high from these confrontations always faded, leaving Sarah seeking the next one. She started carrying the stun gun in her hand while walking at night. Hidden in her pocket but ready, she practiced scenarios in her head. What if someone grabbed her from behind? What if multiple attackers approached? What if someone had a knife? Her flatmate Jessica grew increasingly worried. She had noticed Sarah coming home later, seeming agitated and restless. When she tried to bring it up, Sarah brushed off her concerns. "I'm just living my life, Jess. Not hiding from the world anymore." The change in Sarah's professional life accelerated. She became known as someone who didn't back down, who fought for her ideas and her team. While this earned her respect from some, others found her newly aggressive style off-putting. Her manager Patricia pulled her aside after a particularly heated meeting with a client. "Sarah, I appreciate your passion, but you need to dial it back a bit. We're trying to collaborate with clients, not dominate them." But Sarah struggled to find the balance. The confidence the stun gun gave her had become like a drug, and she needed bigger doses to feel the same high. She started frequenting rougher areas of London, telling herself she was just expanding her comfort zone. One night in Brixton, she intervened in a drug deal she witnessed in an alley. The dealer and buyer both told her to get lost, but Sarah stood at the alley entrance, her stun gun now out of her bag but hidden behind her back. "I'm calling the police," she announced. The dealer laughed. "You do that, love. See what happens." For a moment, Sarah considered revealing her weapon, showing them she wasn't just some helpless woman, but something in the dealer's eyes, a coldness that her father would have recognized, made her step back. She did call the police, from a safe distance, but the men were gone by the time they arrived. That incident should have been a wake-up call, but Sarah rationalized it as a victory. She had made criminals flee just with her presence and determination. She was becoming the kind of person who made a difference, who didn't just walk past injustice. Her family began to notice the change during a weekend visit home. Her father, now retired from the force, watched her carefully over Sunday dinner. "You seem different, Sarah. More confident." "That's good. But be careful. Confidence without wisdom can be dangerous." If only she had listened to his words more carefully. But Sarah was too intoxicated by her newfound power to hear the warning. She deflected his concerns, talking about her success at work and her active social life in London. Her middle sister, Claire, was more direct. "You're acting like someone with something to prove. What's going on?" "Love," Sarah laughed it off. But the observation stung because it was true. She was trying to prove something. To herself. To the world. To every person who had ever made her feel small or vulnerable. The stun gun had given her the means to rewrite her story from victim to victor. Back in London, Sarah's behavior escalated. She started confronting people for minor infractions. Littering, queue jumping, playing music too loud on public transport. Most people, surprised by her assertiveness, would comply or move away, but each confrontation fed her need for the next one. Her friendship circle began to shrink. Rachel stopped inviting her out after Sarah nearly got them kicked out of a bar for confronting a group of men she claimed were harassing women. Jessica started spending more time at her boyfriend's place, avoiding the tension at home, but Sarah didn't notice, or chose not to. She was too focused on her mission to make the world bend to her will. One confrontation at a time. The stun gun had evolved from a tool of protection to a symbol of her transformation. She had custom grips made for it, carried spare batteries, and even named it Thunder. Though she never said this out loud. The forum she frequented online fed her mindset. Other stun gun owners shared stories of using their devices, of standing up to threats and emerging victorious. Sarah became a regular contributor, sharing her own experiences and encouraging others to be proactive about their safety. But the line between proactive and aggressive was blurring. Sarah found herself disappointed when nights passed without incident. She would take unnecessary detours through areas known for trouble. Her hand clutched around Thunder, almost hoping for an opportunity to use it. One particularly bold evening, she decided to walk through a notorious estate in South London after midnight. She told herself she was proving that women shouldn't have to live in fear, that they had the right to walk anywhere, anytime. But deep down, she was hunting for the adrenaline rush that only danger could provide. The estate was quieter than expected, most residents sensibly indoors at that hour. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and disappointment as she made her way through the concrete maze of buildings. She was about to head back to the main road when she heard voices from a stairwell. 3 young men emerged, hooded and moving with the casual confidence of those who owned these streets. They noticed Sarah immediately, an obvious outsider in her business attire and designer handbag. "You lost, lady?" one called out. Not unkindly, but with an edge of suspicion. Sarah's hand was already on Thunder. "No. Just passing through." The men exchanged glances. Another stepped forward. "This ain't the safest place to be passing through at night." "Where you trying to go?" "Where you trying to go? That's my business," Sarah replied, her tone sharper than necessary. The atmosphere shifted. The third man, who hadn't spoken, moved to Sarah's side, not quite blocking her path but making his presence felt. "See? That's not very friendly. We're trying to help you out here." Sarah's thumb found the safety switch. Her heart was pounding, but not entirely with fear. This was what she had been unconsciously seeking. A real confrontation, a chance to prove that she was not to be trifled with. "I don't need your help," she said, pulling Thunder from her bag but keeping it pointed down. The blue electricity crackled between the prongs, illuminating the surprised faces of the men. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the first man laughed. A sound without humor. "You pulled a taser on us for trying to help you? You're crazy." "Lady, just let me pass," Sarah demanded, raising the stun gun slightly. The men backed away, hands raised in mock surrender. "Whatever you say, Rambo. Have a nice walk." They melted back into the shadows, leaving Sarah standing alone with her weapon still crackling. The adrenaline coursing through her system made her feel invincible. She had faced down 3 potential threats and emerged unscathed. But as she made her way home, the high began to fade, replaced by something else. Not quite shame, but an uncomfortable awareness that she had threatened people who, in retrospect, might have genuinely been trying to help. She pushed the thought away. Better to be safe than sorry. Better to be feared than victimized. The next few weeks saw Sarah's behavior reach new extremes. She intervened in a domestic dispute at her apartment building, stunning gun in hand, only to have both parties tell her to mind her own business. She confronted a group of teenagers for smoking weed in the park, earning nothing but mockery and insults. She even pulled thunder on a cyclist who nearly hit her, causing a scene that drew a crowd and nearly resulted in someone calling the police. Each incident left her feeling emptier than the last. The rush was harder to achieve, the satisfaction more fleeting. She was like an addict, needing stronger doses to feel anything at all. Her work suffered as she spent more time thinking about her evening patrols than her marketing campaigns. Patricia had another concerned conversation with her, hinting that her job might be in jeopardy if she didn't refocus. But Sarah couldn't stop. The stun gun had awakened something in her that couldn't be put back to sleep. She was no longer the meek woman who scurried through the city. She was a warrior, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. Or so she told herself. The forum posts she made became more extreme, advocating for preemptive action against potential threats. Some members supported her, sharing their own escalating stories. Others expressed concern, suggesting she might be taking things too far. Sarah dismissed the critics as weak, people who didn't understand what it meant to truly take control of their safety. Her family grew increasingly worried. Phone calls home became tense affairs, with her parents and sisters trying to understand what was happening to their once gentle Sarah. Her father, with his decades of police experience, recognized the signs of someone drunk on power. But his attempts to counsel her fell on deaf ears. "You don't understand," Sarah told him during one particularly heated conversation. "You're a man. And you were a cop. You've never felt helpless like I have. Now I'm not helpless anymore, and you want me to go back to being weak? There's a difference between being strong and being reckless." "Love," her father replied sadly. "Real strength knows when not to fight." But Sarah wasn't interested in philosophy. She was interested in the reality of the streets, where thunder made her equal to any threat, or so she believed. The incident that would finally serve as her wake-up call was approaching, though she didn't know it. Sarah had heard about a special event at Buckingham Palace, some sort of ceremonial gathering that would have increased security and, more interestingly to her, actual royal guards in their traditional uniforms. She had always been fascinated by the royal guards, those stoic figures who stood motionless despite tourist provocations. She had watched videos online of people trying to make them react, always failing. They represented a kind of discipline and power that appealed to her new self-image. Sarah decided to go watch the ceremony, telling herself it was just curiosity. But as she stood among the crowds, watching the guards in their impeccable uniforms and bearskin hats, she felt a strange compulsion. These were people trained to be impassive, to never show weakness or reaction. What would it take to make one acknowledge her power? The thought was absurd. Dangerous even. But it took root in her mind like a poisonous seed. As the ceremony ended and the crowds began to disperse, Sarah lingered. She watched as one guard took up his position near a side gate, beginning his silent vigil. She approached slowly, thunder in her bag as always. Other tourists were taking photos at a respectful distance, but Sarah walked closer. She stood directly in front of the guard, studying his impassive face. He stared straight ahead, through her, as if she didn't exist. "You're very disciplined," she said quietly. No reaction. "I respect that. I've learned about discipline too. About not backing down." Still nothing. Sarah felt the familiar itch. The need to assert herself. To be acknowledged. Her hand drifted to her bag. "We're not so different, you and I," she continued, her voice harder now. "We both understand that power comes from being ready to act. From not showing weakness." A police officer patrolling the area noticed her lingering too close to the guard and approached. "Ma'am, I need you to step back, please." Sarah turned to him, irritated by the interruption. I'm not doing anything wrong. Just admiring the guard. Nevertheless, I need you to maintain a respectful distance, the officer insisted. The old Sarah would have complied immediately, apologizing profusely. But this Sarah felt the weight of thunder in her bag and the months of confrontations behind her. And if I don't, what are you going to do? The officer's expression hardened. Ma'am, I'm giving you a lawful order. Step back now. Sarah's hand was in her bag now, fingers wrapping around Thunder's grip. You people think you can just order everyone around. Well, I'm not some helpless tourist. What happened next would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. As she began to pull the stun gun from her bag, several things occurred simultaneously. The police officer's hand moved to his own equipment belt, his body tensing. Two other officers seemed to materialize from nowhere, moving to flank her, and the royal guard, the one she thought would never react, turned his head slightly to look directly at her. In that moment, Sarah saw herself reflected in his eyes, not as the powerful woman she imagined herself to be, but as a delusional tourist about to make a terrible mistake. The weight of what she was about to do, pulling a weapon in front of Buckingham Palace, in front of armed police and military personnel, crashed down on her. Her hand froze. The stun gun was half out of her bag, visible to everyone. The police officers were shouting commands, their own weapons being drawn. Tourists were screaming and running. And through it all, the royal guard watched her with an expression of pity. Drop the weapon. Drop it now. The commands were deafening. Sarah's fingers released Thunder, and it clattered to the ground. She was immediately forced to her knees, hands pulled behind her back. As the cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she began to sob, not from fear or pain, but from the crushing realization of what she had become. The holding cell at the Westminster police station was a stark, unforgiving space that seemed designed to strip away any remaining delusions of power. Sarah sat on the hard bench, her designer suit wrinkled and stained from being pressed against the ground during her arrest. Her hands, no longer clutching Thunder, trembled as the reality of her situation sank in deeper with each passing minute. The processing had been humiliating. Fingerprints, photographs, the removal of her belongings, including the stun gun that had been her constant companion for months. The desk sergeant had looked at her with a mixture of bewilderment and disappointment, as if unable to understand how a professional woman could have made such a catastrophic error in judgment. Possession of a prohibited weapon, he had read from the charge sheet. Threatening behavior. Failure to comply with lawful orders. Each charge was another nail in the coffin of the person Sarah had thought she was becoming. Her phone call had been to Jessica, her flatmate, who had arrived at the station within an hour. Her face a canvas of worry and frustration. Through the interview room glass, Jessica looked older somehow. Worn down by months of watching Sarah's transformation into someone she no longer recognized. I've called a solicitor, Jessica said quietly. She'll be here soon. Sarah, what were you thinking? At Buckingham Palace? With armed police everywhere? Sarah couldn't answer. How could she explain the compulsion that had driven her? The need to be acknowledged, to prove her power, even in the face of ultimate authority. It sounded insane even to her own ears now. The solicitor, a sharp-eyed woman named Helen Blackwood, arrived within the hour. She listened to Sarah's story with professional detachment, occasionally making notes on her legal pad. When Sarah finished, Helen was silent for a long moment. You're lucky, she finally said. Lucky that you didn't fully draw the weapon. Lucky that no one was hurt in the panic. Lucky that the authorities are viewing this more as a mental health crisis than a terrorist threat. The word terrorist hit Sarah like a physical blow. I'm not a terrorist. I just wanted. What did you want, Miss Mitchell? Helen asked gently. Help me understand so I can help you. But Sarah couldn't articulate it. The months of carrying Thunder, of seeking confrontation, of building her identity around a weapon. It all seemed like someone else's life now, someone delusional and dangerous. The interview with the police detectives was grueling. They wanted to understand everything. When she had purchased the stun gun, why she carried it, what had possessed her to bring it to a high-security area. Sarah found herself telling them about the transformation, about how the device had made her feel powerful, how she had sought out situations to prove that power. Detective Inspector Morris, a woman with keen eyes and graying temples, listened intently. "You say you felt powerless before. Can you tell me about that?" So Sarah did. She talked about the fear of walking alone at night, the harassment, the sense of being prey in an urban jungle. She explained how thunder had changed that, had made her feel like a predator instead of prey. As she spoke, she saw something shift in the detective's expression, not sympathy exactly, but understanding. "I've been doing this job for 22 years, D.I. Morris said when Sarah finished. "I've seen what fear does to people, how it changes them, but I've also seen what happens when people try to take the law into their own hands, when they mistake aggression for strength. I just wanted to feel safe," Sarah whispered. "And did you feel safe?" Sarah thought about the question. Had she felt safe? Or had she just replaced one fear with another? The fear of being victimized, with the fear of not finding the next confrontation, the next hit of adrenaline. "No," she admitted. "I felt powerful, but not safe. Never really safe." The detective nodded as if this was exactly what she expected to hear. Helen managed to arrange for Sarah to be released on bail with strict conditions. She was not to possess any weapons, not to go within 500 meters of any royal residence, and she had to attend mandatory psychological counseling. The alternative was remaining in custody until trial, a prospect that terrified Sarah more than any dark alley ever had. Jessica drove her home in silence. The London streets passed by the window, the same streets Sarah had prowled with thunder in her bag, looking for trouble to confront. They seemed different now, less threatening but also less exciting, just streets, filled with people going about their lives. At the flat, Sarah found that Jessica had already been in her room. Thunder's spare batteries, the extra stun gun she'd been considering buying online, the printouts from the self-defense forums. All of it was gone. "I'm sorry," Jessica said from the doorway. "But the police said there couldn't be any weapons in the flat if you were going to be released here. And honestly, Sarah, I think it's for the best." Sarah wanted to be angry, but she couldn't summon the energy. She sat on her bed, in the room that had once been her sanctuary, and felt smaller than she had in years. Not the cowering smallness of her pre-thunder days, but the appropriate smallness of someone who had vastly overestimated their place in the world. The call to her parents was the hardest. Her father's voice, when he answered, already carried the weight of knowing. Bad news travels fast in police circles, even retired ones. "Oh, Sarah," was all he said at first. Then, "Your mother and I are driving down tonight." "Dad, no, I'm fine." "You're not fine, love. And that's okay. We're coming." Her mother got on the phone, tears evident in her voice. "We'll get through this, sweetheart. Whatever happens, we'll get through it together." Sarah broke down then, sobbing in a way she hadn't since she was a child. All the bravado, all the false strength she had, wrapped around herself like armor, crumbled away. She was just Sarah again, scared and small, and in desperate need of her parents. The mandatory counseling sessions began the following week. Dr. Elizabeth Hartley was a specialist in trauma and behavioral disorders, recommended by Helen as someone who had worked with similar cases. Her office was warm and non-threatening, a far cry from the clinical coldness Sarah had expected. "Tell me about the first time you felt truly powerless," Dr. Hartley said in their first session. Sarah had expected to talk about London, about the catcalls and the dark walks home. Instead, she found herself remembering something from years earlier. A school bully who had tormented her throughout year 8, making her dread going to classes. She remembered the helplessness, the way teachers had dismissed it as kids being kids, the way she had internalized the fear until it became part of her identity. "And when you held the stun gun for the first time," Dr. Hartley prompted, "it was like I could rewrite history, like I could go back and stand up to everyone who had ever made me feel small." But you can't change the past, Sarah. You can only deal with the present." Over the weeks of sessions, patterns emerged. Sarah's transformation hadn't really been about safety or protection. It had been about revenge against a world that had made her feel vulnerable. Thunder had been her way of fighting back against every catcall, every threatening presence, every moment of fear she had ever experienced. But fear is a normal part of life, Dr. Hartley explained. The goal isn't to eliminate fear or to dominate it. It's to manage it, to live with it in healthy ways. Work was another challenge. Patricia had been informed of Sarah's arrest and the pending charges. The company couldn't fire her outright, innocent until proven guilty. But they could, and did, place her on indefinite leave. Her colleagues' reactions ranged from shock to a kind of knowing nod, as if they had seen this coming. Marcus, the colleague whose idea she had confronted him about stealing, sent her a message. "I heard what happened. I'm sorry things got so out of hand. For what it's worth, you were right about the campaign idea being yours. I should have given you credit." It was a small kindness that meant more than he could know. The legal proceedings moved slowly. Helen was optimistic about avoiding prison time, given Sarah's lack of prior offenses and the circumstances. But there would be consequences. A criminal record, community service, ongoing monitoring. The life Sarah had built in London was effectively over. Her parents had extended their stay, taking a short-term rental near her flat. Her father, in particular, spent long hours talking with her about his experiences on the force, about the difference between strength and aggression, power and control. "I've arrested people who thought like you did," he said one evening over tea. "People who confused fear with respect, who thought a weapon made them strong. Real strength, Sarah, is knowing when not to fight. But you carried a weapon every day as a police officer," Sarah pointed out. "Yes, but I was trained for years in when and how to use it. More importantly, I was trained in when not to use it. In 30 years, I drew my weapon maybe a dozen times, fired it twice. The power wasn't in having it, it was in the restraint not to use it." Sarah thought about all the times she had gripped thunder in her bag, the anticipation of potentially using it. She had never actually fired it at anyone, but she realized now that she had wanted to. The restraint her father talked about had never entered her mind. The Royal Guard haunted her thoughts. In her research after the arrest, she learned more about their training, the discipline required to stand motionless for hours, to ignore all provocations, to embody dignity and restraint. They were arguably some of the most powerful soldiers in the world, yet their power came not from aggression, but from perfect control. Helen arranged for Sarah to write a letter of apology to be submitted to the court. Sarah labored over it for days, trying to express her remorse without making excuses. She wrote about her fear, her misguided attempt to feel powerful, her recognition of how wrong she had been. "I disrespected not just the law but the very people who dedicate their lives to protecting others," she wrote. "I confused aggression with strength and paid the price for that confusion. I am deeply sorry for my actions and the fear they caused." The support group Dr. Hartley recommended was held in a community center in North London. Sarah was reluctant to attend at first. The idea of sitting in a circle talking about her issues felt like another form of powerlessness. But court orders were court orders. The group was diverse. Men and women who had let anger, fear, or the desire for control lead them to bad decisions. There was James, who had been arrested for road rage that escalated to assault. There was Priya, who had stalked an ex-boyfriend, convinced she was protecting him from himself. There was Mohammed, whose anxiety had led him to carry illegal weapons, just in case. Listening to their stories, Sarah recognized herself in their words. The justifications, the gradual escalation, the moment when they crossed a line they couldn't uncross. But she also heard their growth, their recognition of their mistakes, their efforts to rebuild. "I thought the knife made me safe," Mohammed shared in one session. "But I was more scared carrying it than I ever was without it. Always worried about using it, about someone taking it from me, about getting caught. The thing that was supposed to free me from fear just gave me new fears." Sarah nodded, understanding completely. Thunder had been the same for her. A solution that became a bigger problem than what it was meant to solve. Her sisters visited regularly, trying to understand what had happened to their baby sister. Emma, ever the practical one, helped her start planning for the future. What she would do after the legal issues were resolved. Where she might go. How she could rebuild. Claire was more interested in the emotional journey. "You were always the gentle one," she said during one visit. "It must have been exhausting, trying to be someone you're not." "I thought I was becoming who I really was," Sarah admitted. "Like the stun gun unlocked the real me." "Maybe it did," Claire said thoughtfully. "Maybe it showed you a part of yourself you needed to see, to understand, to ultimately reject. We all have darkness in us, Sarah. The trick is not letting it drive." The court date approached like a storm on the horizon. Helen prepared her thoroughly, going over possible outcomes and strategies. The prosecution was pushing for a custodial sentence, arguing that Sarah's behavior showed a pattern of escalation that posed a danger to the public. The defense would argue for a suspended sentence with conditions, emphasizing Sarah's lack of prior offenses and her engagement with treatment. "The judge will want to see genuine remorse and understanding," Helen explained. "Not just regret at being caught, but real comprehension of why your actions were wrong." Sarah spent sleepless nights thinking about how to convey that understanding. How could she explain that she did see now, that the powerful woman she thought she was becoming had actually been a frightened girl playing with dangerous toys? The news of her arrest had made some papers. "Marketing executive threatens palace guards with stun gun," though thankfully it hadn't gone viral. Still, Sarah knew her name was now associated with this moment of madness. Future employers would Google her and see not her marketing achievements but her arrest at Buckingham Palace. Dr. Hartley helped her process this loss of reputation. "You're grieving the life you had," she explained. "That's normal and necessary. But you're also free now from the person you were becoming. That's worth something." Was it? Sarah wasn't sure. She missed the confidence Thunder had given her. Even knowing it was false confidence built on a dangerous foundation, she missed feeling powerful, even knowing that power was an illusion. Most of all, she missed the simplicity of seeing the world in terms of predator and prey, rather than the complex reality of human interaction. Her victim impact statement arrived 2 weeks before the trial. Sarah had known intellectually that her actions had affected others, but reading the words of the tourists who had fled in panic, the parents who had shielded their children, the officers who had experienced those seconds of not knowing if she would comply, it was devastating. One statement, in particular, stayed with her. It was from the royal guard she had confronted. His name was Corporal Timothy Harrison, and he wrote about the moment from his perspective. "In my 8 years of service, I have stood silent through countless provocations. It is not just my duty but my honor to represent the dignity of the crown through restraint and discipline. When Miss Seated, Mitchell approached me. I saw not a threat but a troubled individual seeking something I could not give. Validation, through confrontation. When she reached for her weapon, my training kicked in, but so did my sadness. Here was someone so lost that she sought to find herself in opposition to others. I hope she finds a better path." Sarah read those words over and over, tears streaming down her face. This man she had tried to provoke into acknowledging her power had seen through her completely, had understood her better in that moment than she had understood herself in months. The week before the trial, Sarah made a decision. She asked Jessica to take her back to the spot where it had all gone wrong. They stood outside Buckingham Palace, tourists streaming past, guards at their posts. Sarah watched the ceremony of the changing of the guard from a respectful distance, seeing it now not as a challenge to overcome but as a tradition of discipline and service. "They're not powerful because they could hurt someone," she said to Jessica. "They're powerful because they choose not to. Because they stand there, no matter what, doing their duty." Jessica squeezed her hand. "You're learning." As they walked away, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Genuine peace. Not the electric anticipation of confrontation, not the hollow victory of making someone back down, but actual peace. The city around her was still the same, still capable of danger, still requiring caution. But she was different. She no longer needed to dominate it or hide from it. She could simply exist in it. The final counseling session before the trial focused on the future. Dr. Hartley asked Sarah what she wanted from life now, stripped of the false power Thunder had provided. "I want to feel strong again," Sarah said, "but real strength." "And how might you find that?" Sarah thought about her father's words, about Corporal Harrison's statement, about all the truly strong people she had encountered who had never needed to threaten anyone. "By helping others, maybe. By using whatever platform I have left to warn people about the path I took. By being honest about how fear can twist into something dangerous." Dr. Hartley smiled. "That sounds like real strength to me." The night before the trial, Sarah's family gathered in her flat. Her parents, her sisters, Jessica, all the people who had watched her transformation and stood by her through its consequences. They didn't talk about the next day or what might happen. Instead, they shared memories of the Sarah they had always known. Creative, kind, gentle, but determined in her own quiet way. "You're still that person," her mother said firmly. "You just forgot for a while." As Sarah lay in bed that night, she thought about Thunder one last time. The device was evidence now. Locked away somewhere, eventually to be destroyed. She felt no longing for it, no desire to hold it again. It had served its purpose, not the purpose she had intended, but perhaps the one she had needed. It had shown her who she could become if she let fear and the desire for power control her. It had taught her, in the hardest possible way, that true strength came from within, not from weapons or confrontation. Tomorrow she would face judgment for her actions. She would accept whatever consequences came, knowing she deserved them. But she would also begin the long journey of rebuilding. Not as the false warrior she had tried to become, but as someone who had faced her demons and chosen a different path. The guard's words echoed in her mind as she drifted off to sleep. "I hope she finds a better path." She intended to prove worthy of that hope. One day at a time. One choice at a time. The real work of becoming genuinely strong was just beginning.